Hello, Cowlitz County, Wahkiakum County. This is Father Bryan with your update for Friday, March 27th. It is the second day of Governor Inslee's order to shelter in place. And I'll be honest, it looks like there are fewer cars out on the road today than there were yesterday. Yesterday, on the first day of this order, quite honestly, there were more people out and about, it looked like, than the previous days. But it looks like today people are perhaps staying indoors. So it could also have to do with the fact that it's quite a bit rainier. The weather's not as good. But we'll see how this goes. It's day 2 of 2 weeks. But today we're going to be talking about another aspect of our parish prayer plan. We're going to be talking about fasting, because part of our parish prayer plan is that we do offer a fast on Fridays until this virus is gone. Fasting, as many of you know, is an ancient and honestly fairly mysterious form of prayer, but it's a very powerful form of prayer. It's a spiritual practice which, just like the Psalms, predates Christianity, but it also takes on a fuller meaning in light of Jesus Christ. But even if you're not Catholic, and even if you're not really religious at all, I think if you listen to this, you'll learn how fasting might even be able to help you in a natural sense, because I can certainly say for me that fasting has benefited me naturally as well, maybe in ways that aren't necessarily spiritual. But when we do talk about fasting and why it's a good practice for Christians, we should point out that, first of all, Jesus himself fasted. Okay, and praying like Jesus and doing the things that he did is always good. Jesus also says, he teaches that fasting is a powerful form of prayer, and it can even cast out evil that other prayer can't. Jesus even gives his people instructions on fasting, saying that it should be done in secret. We shouldn't fast in order to draw attention to ourselves. All right, we shouldn't fast to show off some type of strength. Okay, we don't fast to try to win God's approval or to prove to God or others how strong we are. So why do we fast? Well, one of the prefaces to the Eucharistic prayer for Lent tells us some of the fruits of fasting. It says, through bodily fasting, you, God, restrain our faults, raise up our minds, and bestow both virtue and its rewards. This is what happens when we fast in secret and with humility. Okay, again, we'll restrain our faults, raise up our minds, and bestow virtue and receive virtue and its rewards. Okay, so how does this work? Well, again, we don't always know the fullness of fasting and how it works for sure. And we don't need to know. We just need to know that if we do it with the right disposition and mindset, it will work. And that being said, even though we might not know the fullness of how fasting works, there are a few things that we can say about it, and I'll tell you some ways that I've noticed fasting has helped me and others. Okay, and again, some of it is not necessarily just spiritual, but natural. Right? Even people who don't have any particular religious faith might derive some benefit from fasting. And I heard a quote from a different priest once that really nailed it. I think his name is Father Josh Johnson. He's sort of one of those famous priests, who travels around speaking at youth conferences and things like that. I think he's from New Orleans, Louisiana. And he said that when we fast, we practice saying no to the pleasure that comes from good things so that we can say no to the pleasure that comes from bad things. Okay, I'll say that again, and you can pause the video if you need to think about it, okay? When we fast, we're practicing saying no to the pleasure that comes from good things so that we can be more able to say no to the pleasure that comes from sin, that comes from bad things, things that might harm us or others. All right, we live in such an impulsive culture, and we're never asked to wait too long to act on some type of impulse. All right, when I fast from food, for example, there are moments throughout the day when I feel very, very hungry. And something inside of me starts to say, I'm just going to get hungrier and hungrier and hungrier all throughout the day, and this is going to get worse and worse and worse. But, at least for me, it doesn't usually act that way. It doesn't usually work that way. The impulse that I have for food, even if I have a temporary moment where I'm very hungry, it'll actually die down and go away. All right? It really doesn't last as strong forever. All right? Most of our impulses are kind of like that. When we are faced with an impulse or a temptation, we sometimes think it's just going to steadily get worse and worse and worse. But again, it doesn't usually work that way. Fasting helps us to experience that and to recognize that we don't need to satisfy every single impulsive physical or emotional desire that we might have. Okay, again, at least that's how I've experienced it. So that's kind of how fasting restrains our faults. Okay, it builds patience, which again is something that we need right now. Okay, we need patience in this particular moment. Fasting also, it says, raises up our minds. All right, when I'm fasting and I have one of those moments of painful hunger, it actually causes me to raise up my mind to God and ask for strength and support. And so that sort of trains me. It causes a thought process to arise naturally in me. If I'm ever tempted to do something maybe sinful, something that's harmful to me or others, I'm much more ready to ask God for help. I also realize that if I need this much help from God, that I can barely go a day without food, that I must really need His help for salvation. So in a certain sense, fasting opens me up to a lot of grace and reminds me that I'm pretty weak and that I need God's help in many aspects of life, not just when it comes to food or whatever it is that I'm fasting from. Fasting also puts us in touch with the lives of the poor. All right, fasting from food temporarily and feeling that hunger makes me much more compassionate to people who spend their lives hungry, not because they're choosing to, but because their circumstances force them to be hungry. It also makes me grateful to God for what I've received in life, which is incredibly good. It makes me very satisfied with what I've been given. Fasting helps me be satisfied, and it stops me from feeling jealous of other people. So in a time of coronavirus, fasting can actually bear a lot of fruit for us. Again, yeah, there were some ways that I mentioned God specifically in this, but even if you're not religious, perhaps some of those things will apply to you as well. It will make you more compassionate towards those who are poor. Okay, it will help you resist things that might hurt you or other people. Okay, but in a time of coronavirus, this is important. It will make us more compassionate to our neighbors and those who are hungry or experiencing some economic challenges right now. Fasting will detach us from some of the excesses of our lifestyle and free us to just be happy with the basic aspects of human life, not thinking that we need anything more than we've been given. It will also free us up to be generous with what we've been given. and to share some of our wealth, some of our food, some of our resources with other people who need them. So fast away, not just during the rest of this Lenten period, but during this coronavirus pandemic period. Fridays especially, we're all going to fast from something. Now, if you've never fasted before, you might want to do something simple, okay? Skip a meal or not have second helpings of food, or, not have dessert or something like that, okay? That might be what you do. You can take a lukewarm shower or a cold shower instead of a hot shower, okay? But if you have fasted before, maybe now is a moment to go kind of big. Fast on bread and water on Fridays during this time and see how that goes. It will bear a lot of fruit. Again, fasting does a lot of good things, even though I don't always know how some of the deeper spiritual realities work. But again, Jesus says that fasting is a very powerful form of prayer. And maybe somehow fasting is going to help us end the spread of this virus. At least it's worth a try. That's everything for today. As always, I want you to know that I miss you and I love you, and I can't wait for us to be back here in our local parishes very soon. Blessings.